Welcome back to the show, everyone. It's your host, Danny Haifong. Hit the like button as you come on. That helps boost the stream in YouTube's algorithm. Well, in less than 24 hours, Israel has blown up Trump's so-called peace deal by killing upwards of 6 Palestinians and counting in multiple strikes in Gaza. This comes as China has dropped a major bombshell on the U.S. military with strict rare earth mineral regulations that have caused Donald Trump to sink the market for a full day amid new tariff threats of 100%, only for him to Trump always chickens out taco again in the lead up to a potential Trump-Xi meeting at the APEC summit later this month. Our guest today just traveled actually to where a lot of rare earth minerals are found, as well as many other things, including the doorway to China's Belt and Road Initiative, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And he is here to talk to us about what he saw, which confirms that all roads lead to a major confrontation with China. Pepe Escobar is a geopolitical analyst, journalist, and good friend of the show. Pepe, good to see you again.
Well, I'm still surviving, Danny. Well, at least I'm not in the West, like we were discussing before the show. I'm in Thailand and just back from 1 month's ultra hardcore 3 hours of sleep a night in China, especially in the Gansu corridor and then in Xinjiang. So we could stay all day long talking about China here, but okay, we have to restrict to 1 hour.
Well, Pepe, as you were gone, of course, the world was going up in smoke. There was Trump's Kabuki peace deal theater now leading to already violations. But of course, there's the bombshell that China has dropped with these new regulations. Now, I want you to talk about your trip because I think it all relates to all of this and everything that you saw, which I believe really helps us understand what is really going on right now in the world. So, Pepe, I want you to take it away, and I'll make sure to pull up your piece on this matter as you go on and some other things that people might need to know about. Yep.
There'll be more. There was one last week, one today, and there'll be 2 more this week. The minimum I can do for the moment is 4 columns in detail. And of course, the bulk of the material which I've been going through, not only the pictures, I haven't had time to upload pictures. Still, there are already a lot of pictures on my Telegram. And on this column today, which focus on Dunhuang, not Xinjiang, focus on the Gansu corridor, on the ancient Silk Road, there are some pics as well. And I will upload more pictures on my Telegram. But I have to go through all my written sources, observations, discussions I had with museum curators, scholars, and it's the material is absolutely mind-boggling. And for you and for our audience to understand, this trip is something very, very serious, and for me, very personal as well. I wanted to do it in 2020. And guess what happened? COVID. Because in 2019, I traveled in the Central Asian stands, especially Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And I went all the way to the 3 borders with Xinjiang. So this trip was to go to the borders, but from the Xinjiang point of view, and of course, travel through Xinjiang. In the past 2 months, something extraordinary happened. I pitched the idea of shooting a documentary in Xinjiang. And of course, this was accepted, and this is what we did. It was a mega production. It will be released in an independent platform, hopefully by the end of the year, beginning of January. We shot 2 terabytes of images only in Xinjiang. Our director of photography, Stan, he's Russian from Buryatia. He lives in Shanghai, speaks fluent Chinese, and he's an excellent technician. So we work side by side all the way from Urumqi and Turfan, all the way to near the China-Pakistani border. So Stan is going through the footage right now. There will be 2 guys in LA who are going to coordinate the editing process, which is going to be Wow. Tell me about it. We're going to decide if we have additional teasers or even mini documentaries, because the amount of footage is absolutely outstanding. And some of the footage, Danny, it was great because it was impromptu, was by accident. I'll give you an example. Midnight in a small oasis in the southern Silk Road. And I told my Uyghur ground producers, guys, I need a shave because I was getting a Saddam Hussein proportion, a beard, and it didn't look very well on screen. The guy said, oh, no problem. You just crossed the road. There's a barber shop is still open. This was midnight. Everything was closed, dark, in the small ways in the Southern Silk Road. So my friend Carl Zah and myself, we crossed the road. We enter a barber shop in Xinjiang, and we have the most extraordinary conversation with two young barber shopper guys in Xinjiang, plus their sidekick, a guy who seemed to know everything about everything, who were compulsively playing his video games on a smartphone. So this kind of stuff, capture on camera, this kind of stuff, of course, it's absolutely marvelous for a documentary. Because what we wanted from the beginning is to shoot the real Xinjiang, talk to Uyghurs. Our ground producers and our major producers, our major producer and organizer on the ground, everybody was Uyghur. Our drivers were all Uyghur, except one of them who was a Kazakh who lived in Murunchi and spoke fluent Uyghur. So everything that I wanted, I would tell Jenny, I need to see a silk factory this morning. 5 minutes later, she would arrange it. That kind of stuff, you know. Or look, these ancient ruins over there. There are another ones. There's another one who's 50 kilometers away. Is there time for us to go there and back? She would arrange it as well. And our drivers, absolute highway star types. You know, they will do everything, including. And then I will say, guys, you enter a Hall of Fame. We crossed the Taklamakan Desert from the northern Silk Road to the southern Silk Road. This in itself is, well, it's a dream of every Silk Road explorer. Now we can do it on a 4x4 instead of a camel caravan that could be engulfed by the shifting sands. So 450 kilometer plus from north to south. It's an absolutely outstanding experience because you are in a first-class highway crossing the Taklamakan. You have what the Chinese call the Chinese magic cube, which are reeds on both sides of the highway, protecting the highway from the shifting sands and the snowstorms. You have an extra green fence on both sides. And at the start and at the end of our crossing, we go through the famous green belt that surrounds the desert. 3,500 kilometers of green belt surrounding the whole Taklamakan. So to see all that live in front of you is already quite something. The next day, talking to our Uyghur friends, we did something even more hardcore. We actually crossed almost half of the Taklamakan again and back through the shifting sands. So this was, off-road hardcore to the limit. Very, very tough. And you have to be an excellent driver to pull it off. Otherwise, you're stuck in the sand for hours. Because we wanted to see what the local Uyghurs call the lost tribe of the Taklamakan. It's a small village in the middle of the desert, literally. Basically, two streets with a few businesses, one tower with Wi-Fi, of course, with the flagpole with the Chinese flag on top. It's considered an area of national security. You cannot take pictures, by the way. Very sensitive. And then when we get there, after this back-breaking trip across the sand dunes, the locals say, look, we have something to show you guys. You know what they're doing? Typical Chinese enterprising style. They turned some of the very, very old shacks in this little village, like 50 families live there, not more than that. They're turning into quite comfortable bed and breakfasts for the off-road crowd in China, which is getting enormous. We crossed some of them with their Tank 300 or Tank 500 Jeeps equipped to the hilt, and they were having a blast off-roading in the real desert. So when they get to the village, now they have a very comfortable bed and breakfast with actual showers. Can you believe that? This is in the middle of the most inhospitable desert on the planet, only in China, of course. Okay, so these are some of the details of the trip. So the trip, the objective of the documentary, in fact, is to show Xinjiang from a geoeconomic and geopolitical point of view, trade, of course, in terms of being the hub of Belt and Road connecting China to Central Asia and beyond, and the start of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, for instance. We started in Kashgar at the last stretch, and we followed the Karakoram close to the China-Pakistan border. There was a problem because we had 3 foreigners in our team to get a permit to actually go to the actual border. On the Pakistani side, it's very easy. You just walk to the China-Pakistan border. You can even touch the China-Pakistan border. On the Chinese side, it's much more complicated. But we did what we wanted to do, which was to go through an absolutely extraordinary maze of highways, some of them brand new or repaved, across the Karakoram and off-road and off-ramps of the Karakoram, going through the Pamiri Mountains at a median altitude of 3,500 meters and sometimes reaching 4,000 meter high, And of course, some of the most beautiful mountains on the planet and some of the most beautiful high-altitude lakes on the planet, like the White Sands Lake and the Karakul Lake. I had done this before in the 90s, just to give you an idea. And obviously, what I see now compared to what it was in the 90s, and the last time, 2003, 2004, if I'm not mistaken, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Because then we see for ourselves in this long stretch of time of almost a quarter of a century, which is not much in Chinese terms, how Beijing managed to organize a sustainable development strategy for the whole of Xinjiang in every aspect. Excellent universities, rearranging the urban landscape in some of the major oases, which are absolutely impactful. We were, for instance, in a city that would be a tier 4 or even tier 5 in China, Yutian, in the southern Silk Road. And it's absolutely impeccable. Boulevards, towers with lights all over. Absolutely outstanding 4-star hotels that in Europe people don't even suspect something like this exists, not to mention for the price they charge, like $70 or $80 for a state-of-the-art room, everything electronically controlled. These things in the West don't exist. Simply, people don't even know what it is. You stay in a shitty hotel in France or in UK or in Germany, you pay 400 euros for a room that's absolutely inferior to any one of these across China. So, in a nutshell, what do you see traveling across Xinjiang? From Urumqi, which is a high-tech hub. When I arrived in Urumqi, I almost had a heart attack because I arrived at the wrong downtown. I came through the high-speed rail from Lanzhou. You arrive at the southern train station, which is in the southern part of Urumqi. I said, but this is near downtown. And then I looked around. Oh, look, it doesn't look like downtown. And then my taxi driver said, no, this is the other downtown. The real downtown is very far away, and we have to take the highway to get there. So they have 2 downtowns from now on. It's a city of more than 4 million people now, Urumqi. It's like the standard Eastern Seaboard mega Chinese city, but in the middle of the desert, 4,000 kilometers away from Beijing. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And of course, when you leave Urumqi and you start going to the oasis around, what do you see? You see Xinjiang as the mecca of energy for China, which is one of the most extraordinary spectacles if you're driving on a super highway, looking left and right, and it goes on and on and on. Forests of solar panels, forests of wind turbines. So we have the solar panels and the wind turbines side by side. And of course, every 100 kilometers or so, those absolutely gigantic solar power stations. And you drive for another 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, and you see the sun reflecting at the height of the pole, irradiating solar energy all over. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Not to mention everything fully electrified, these gigantic electric poles all over the place. So you see how Xinjiang, not only they have outstanding amounts of energy, they export their energy to the rest of China. So the energy capital of China is Xinjiang. And all that and all this organization of the energy market happened especially over the last 10 years or so. Not to mention that all the important Pipeline-istan actors, they arrive in Xinjiang. The Turkmenistan gas pipeline arrives in Xinjiang. Kazakhstan, the oil pipelines arrive in Xinjiang. The power of Siberia will arrive in Xinjiang as well. So they have this extraordinary combination of fossil fuels, liquefied natural gas, pipeline gas, and all sorts of green energy all across Xinjiang. It's immensely impressive. And you see that when everywhere you go, even the small oasis towns in the northern Silk Road or the southern Silk Road, they are mini super cities. They are mini versions of Shanghai, Guangzhou, Chengdu, or Chongqing. Even if they have 1 million people, 2 million people, it's immensely impressive. Okay, so this is the high-tech side. On the cultural side, it's even more interesting because you see, contrary to all the cosmic stupidity vociferated by Western mainstream media, of course, every day we were joking, okay, let's find some slaves from the concentration camps. Oh, look, that woman speaking Cotton, she's a slave. Let's go there and interview her. Come on, give me a break. And we were with Uyghurs. And of course, this is discussed among Uyghurs. It's a subject of discussion. Everybody knows that these re-education camps, and they do exist, they were focused on Uyghurs, indoctrinated online Uyghurs that end up in places like Idlibistan in northern Syria. And nowadays they are even in Damascus. Or they are, for instance, on the Asian side of Istanbul, if you take the ferry from the European to the Asian side. And these, of course, the ones who are outside of China, the Chinese intel services, they have a full-on profile of all of them. So they better not even think of going back to Xinjiang. And the ones who were apprehended inside Xinjiang, they were sent to these rehabilitation camps where they learn a few facts of life about living in the People's Republic. Look, you follow the rules of the People's Republic, or you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail, essentially. Repent or else. That's what it is. And this applies to an infinitesimal minority of Uyghurs. The Uyghurs that we met, they were businessmen, they were traders, merchants. They had all sorts of small business in those absolutely outstanding night markets, especially the food markets in every oasis, the big ones like Turfan, for instance, or Kucha, and the small ones like Yutian in the southern Silk Road, not to mention Kashgar. And then you arrive in Kashgar, which is the big crossroads of the ancient and the new Silk Roads as well, because the Karakoram Highway starts in Kashgar. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor starts in Kashgar. So this is very, very important. I had a shock. And then this is not a criticism, but actually a shock. I was expecting the Karakoram on the Chinese side to be at least a 4-lane superhighway. It's not. It's still 2-lane, very congested, especially as you exit Kashgar, with lots of checkpoints. So in terms of free flow of trade between China and Pakistan is very, very slow. They told me that they are going to still wait to try to duplicate at least this stretch. So, but this is going to take a while. And I remember that a few years ago, there was discussion that China might even build high-speed rail from Kashgar to southern Pakistan. Now, this is going to take another 20 years at least, So you see these bottlenecks, and this may be a problem for as the traffic, that trade traffic between China and Pakistan increases. But it's fascinating because if you are in one of these checkpoints near Kashgar, for instance, I saw, for instance, a lot of Tajikistan trucks coming back and forth. So they leave Kashgar and they go to the Tajik border, and then they go to Central Asia. And of course, the bulk of the trade is done by rail. And this is something that we're going to do next year when we're going to shoot part 2 of our documentary. And then we're going to go to the 3 borders with Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, especially the Kazakh border. The town of Alashankou in China is the last major town in China, in Xinjiang, before the trains cross to Korgos, which is in the Kazakh border, and then go all the way across Central Asia and all the way to Europe in many cases. So every important cargo train from anywhere in China, if it comes from Chongqing, full of laptops, for instance, if it comes from Yiwu, with lots of small merchandise, for instance, they have to stop in Alashankou and then cross in Korgos to Kazakhstan. So we went to the train station in Urumqi to see the trains. Problem is, we arrived at near midnight, and of course there were no trains because the trains depart during the day. So this is going to be for the next documentary. So when we were coming back, it was very funny. Because when we were coming back, we stopped at a crossroads, and one of these cargo trains actually passed in front of us. But we couldn't see the trains departing from Urumqi train station, which is extraordinary because I saw them arriving at Korgos in Kazakhstan. And at the time, this was in 2019, there were several trains arriving each day. And now it's even more. In certain days, there may be dozens of trains coming from different parts of China. They go through Urumqi and then cross the border in Kazakhstan. So this is the Belt and Road angle. And on the Uyghur business angle, local business angle, for instance, we got a crash course on how the Chinese redeveloped the city of Kashgar. In the past, until in the late 90s when I visited, and then in the early 2000s, there were 2 segregated Kashgars. One of them was the old city, which looked like the old city, at least for the past few centuries. Not much different from what it was in the 14th, for instance, when the Silk Road started to decline. And the Chinese city, which was relatively small, but with a People's Square, with a Mao statue in the middle, predominant Han Chinese. Nowadays, they are seamlessly integrated. In fact, we walked from the Chinese city to the old city, and everything is completely integrated and organic. So you see everybody mingling. Han Chinese, Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Tibetans, Kyrgyz nomads, you name it, Mongols. So that's fascinating. This is the famous Xi Jinping style people-to-people's exchanges, which you see in the oases in the markets all across the Silk Roads, and you see in the major bazaar town, which is Kashgar, which is the crossroads for everything coming from the east in Xinjiang and going west or going south to Pamiri lands, to no man's land near the China-Pakistan border. Around these lakes, you still find Kyrgyz nomads. Total Kyrgyz nomads with their yaks. They rent their yaks for Chinese domestic tourists. And this brings us to one of the most extraordinary developments of the past few years in China, which when you see live in Xinjiang is even more impressive. The boom of domestic tourism in China. We saw families from all over, from Sichuan, from Shanxi province, from Beijing, from Shanghai, in their self-driven tank jeeps. Not very expensive. You can rent a tank jeep, a tank 300. You can rent every day in Xinjiang with unlimited mileage for only $60 a day. So for an average family of four, Chinese family of four, it's perfect. You bring your family with the kids, you put it in the jeep, and you can, go across Xinjiang. And the Uyghurs are saying, look, this is the first time that we see that in these crazy proportions. Whole families en masse coming from everywhere. And it ties with the fact that less than one Chinese has ever been to Xinjiang. And they started to go last year, essentially, after COVID, after a certain normalization post-COVID, starting last year. And this year was the mega boom. And we saw the tail end of the mega boom when we arrived in Kashgar, because we arrived in Kashgar, it was already a golden week in China. Starts from the 1st and went all the way to the 8th, 8-day holiday. It's what every Chinese person waits for the whole year. And everybody apparently took the same decision to hit the Kashgar Old City. So during the day, which means they have a ceremony every day in the, I would say, fake wall of Kashgar has walls, but they built a fake wall for the entrance. And it's written in, in Uyghur, in Mandarin, and in English. Ancient city of Kashi, totally Disneyland style, but who cares, But the rest of the walls are legit, and they have a ceremony every morning, every day with Uyghur dances and all that. And at 11 o'clock, they open the gates. And when they open the gates, it's crazy. You have this influx of zillions of Chinese tourists. So between 11 in the morning and maybe 1 o'clock at night, you cannot even walk in the old city of Kashgar, which is basically an enormous bazaar, an open-air bazaar, And of course, business for everybody. And then, of course, when we start asking, okay, how does it work for the people who actually lived here for hundreds of years, the families? They explained to us, it's very simple. They had two options. The government helped them to rebuild their homes. And they had two options: to stay in their homes and profit from this central government help and provisional government help, or they can rent the premises, or at least part of their homes, to businesses and make a lot of money because the rents are very high. Just to give you an idea, in the main alleys in the bazaar, to rent a first floor house, or to rent the first floor, like 80 square meters or 100 square meters or so, it's $4,000 a month, which in Xinjiang is a lot of money. But the merchants were saying, look, in the high season, we can get it easily. And then for 3 or 4 months, we lay low. But we make our money now in summer and September all the way to now October, and it's worth it. So, you see this integration of private business and state support. You see the organization of the urban organization of the oases and of the big cities. You see the new Silk Road style trade, which replicates forms of trade of the ancient Silk Roads. So it's a seamless environment, and it gives you a sensation of harmony, which, coming from us, jaded Westerners, it's quite something. And I've been all over the bloody planet, Danny. And so I was very, very impressed. I was not expecting it to be so well organized. But when you look at small details, like you are in the small boulevard in a small oasis in the Silk Road, and you look at a parking lot, there are zillions of charging stations for electric vehicles anywhere you go. So you can recharge your vehicle anywhere, in any conditions, anytime. And some of the charging stations are from Sinopec. Sinopec deals with oil, but they're also investing in green energy. So, this, okay, the headline would be socialism with Chinese characteristics came up with a development model to the far west of China. They applied in less than a quarter of a century, and it's a resounding success. This is our headline.
Yeah, well, Pepe, that was certainly a sweeping review of your trip, and
part of the trip. I didn't even talk about the first part.
Just part of it, but as this trip was happening, and I think this is what's so great about your travels during this time, is I was showing up on the screen all of the developments that were happening just afterward in the lead up to you coming back from your trip, which renewed this trade war on China that the U.S. is trying to spearhead. You had a reaction to these absolutely nuclear regulations, at least in the minds of the United States' elite, on rare earth minerals. Some of them actually are located in Xinjiang. And the reaction has been absolutely catastrophic. Trump threatened 100% tariffs. He had to roll that language back when the world market sank to a colossal degree. And now China's doubling down and saying regulations on rare earths are important because they're key to military use, the United States, and therefore China has the legal right to uphold peace and stability worldwide by making sure they know how they are being used. React to this, Pepe. What exactly is going on? And maybe you can tie it into this overall situation where you have Donald Trump at the Kabuki Theater Peace Summit, and then at the Knesset saying, Netanyahu calls me every day about weapons I don't know how to use. And here you have China saying your weapons may not be able to be produced because they threaten our national security. Your reaction?
Well, I think we should not waste our precious time talking about that ghastly two-part episode, Gaza and then Sharm el-Sheikh, or Sham el-Sheikh, right? Which was the coronation of the Trump-Netanyahu combo. It's beyond disgusting. First of all, because it has nothing to do with peace in Gaza. And of course, I think many of you have seen the leaked last page of the so-called peace agreement, where you have Trump's signature, Erdogan's signature, the prime minister or foreign minister of Qatar, the prime minister of Qatar's signature, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, the Trump signature is very, very bold over there, and not a single Palestinian signature. So that in itself is beyond grotesque. Well, what China, I wrote a very, very short post on X, basically saying that China decided to go for tech decapitation. This is what this new directive is. This proves that Xi Jinping and the Politburo lost their patience completely with the stupidities from the circus ringmaster. And now they're playing hardball. And looking at Trump's reaction, you can see that the hardball really, this time, hit him in his mouth, in fact. It's very, very simple. If you want to import any rare earths from China, or any product with over 0.1% of Chinese rare earth, you need to obtain an export license. It's very, very simple. So if you are running a civilian operation, there will be no problem. This applies to countless nations in the global south. When it comes to the American industrial military complex, wow, that's where it hurts. And this is exactly what the Chinese wanted this time. So the famous FAFO, to be polite, this time Taco was FAFOD'd to Kingdom Come literally. And he never expected this to happen. It's going to take best expectations. It would take at least 5 years, but more like 10 years to start a new rare earth supply chain from scratch, which is what the US is going to have to do from now on. Not going to happen. And in 10 years, in all these high-tech sectors involving rare earths and minerals, China will be leaps and leaps ahead. So what is the strategic bet of the Chinese at the moment? And this, when you look at how they conceive that is strategically and why now, you see the merits of 5-year plans and subsequent 5-year plans, which, by the way, were applied with extreme success in the development of Xinjiang and Tibet, what in the previous centuries was called in classic China, the Western regions. So they made a bet in 1999 with the Go West campaign to develop the Western regions at breakneck speeds. And this had always a very special place in every subsequent 5-year plan. Same thing about Made in China 2025, which was launched 10 years ago. So 2 subsequent 5-year plans as well. They said, look, in 2035, we have to be, if not the leader, at least the top 2 or top 3 in these 10 high-tech sectors. They are already leaders in 7 to 8, and soon they will be leaders in the other 2. Once again, central planning. Now, for this Ministry of Commerce directive regarding rare earths, by the way, processing and refining is controlled by China up to 90% of the market. Very, very important. It's very simple. Their strategic bet is that they will be able to reorganize their semiconductor gap. They still have a gap vis-a-vis the United States, much faster than the United States will be able to reorganize their rare earth supply chain, and of course, a possible effort towards reindustrializing the United States. So this is a very, very ambitious bet. If the Chinese are doing this, it's because they gamed that in detail and they said, we can pull it off. Why? Once again, central planning, unlimited funds for research. And this means from Tsinghua University, which nowadays is the top scientific university on the planet, to research centers such as Huawei in Shenzhen, all across the spectrum. And of course, directives, goals, bringing the best brains who are still not in China, who are still somewhere in Europe or in Silicon Valley, back to China, enticing them to go back. Most of them are already back. So that's it. When you put this all together, you have a concerted strategy in terms of the trade tech war with the mindset of, okay, it's an enormous challenge, but we have all it takes to win. What does the United States have in contrast? Less than zero planning, bluster, and a circus ringmaster flapping his wings nonstop. That's what they have. No wonder, not Danny. No wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, Pepe, as you were talking, in your X post, you mentioned the RIC, Russia. I think you're referring to this time India and China and how Trump has
Yes.
essentially isolated and provoked all of them to pursue
At the
a
same time.
multipolar path at the same time. But then we also have developments, Pepe. I don't know if you've seen that, and I'll pull it up in a second. That there have been all these talks about Russia now through these leaked documents through Black Mirror hackers group saying that Russia has been supplying Iran with. I know that you put this on your Telegram too, with SU-35s. Now,
Yes.
when we look at it this way, we have China really going really nuclear on the U.S.'s military-industrial complex with these rare earth regulations. And then you have on the other side, Iran having to prepare for war and Russia being a supplier with its massively growing military-industrial complex. React to this. How does this change the calculus in any way? And how do you see this development taking shape amid this absolutely chaotic environment?
Which calculus? You mean the Pentagon's calculus?
Or just in general, the geopolitical calculus as things develop?
Apart from speculation, we should not go into speculative crystal balls and all that. We have to deal with fact, reality, right? This is what we independent analysts do. Exactly. Well, before the start of my trip, I think I mentioned that in other podcasts. I had an off-the-record meeting with former PLA Colonel Joe Bo in Beijing. Off the record. We agreed from the beginning off the record. He told me some really hardcore stuff, fascinating stuff. He asked me questions about Russia. So basically, he talked to me about China, and I talked to him about Russia. And what I can tell you and all of you guys is that he acknowledged very diplomatically that China is helping Iran in lots of areas. I cannot specify, but I'm sure all of you have a pretty good idea. Just as much as the Russians never on the record tell anybody, not even Russian media, not even people who interview Peskov or Lavrov on a daily basis, what they are actually sending to Iran. And we know they are sending a lot of very important stuff because there are Antonovs landing in Tehran practically on a daily basis. So what we can say is that Russia and China, part of their interacting and overlapping strategic partnership, these three, they have strategic partnerships among themselves as well. And obviously, the three of them know very well that an attack on Iran, I wouldn't say is practically certain, but is bound to happen within the next few months. All this diversionist tactic that, Netanyahu sending messages
to Putin, right?
To third parties that we're not interested in the war. This is complete bullshit. Nobody trusts, of course. So maybe the timeline was pushed further back towards, let's say, a few months from now, early 2026 or spring of 2026. It's not going to be between now and the end of the year, because the main objective now is to divert attention from the genocide. This whole kabuki about Gaza is basically, there's two objectives. One, get the bloody hostages back, which is the only thing they talk about, and divert attention from the genocide so the rest of the world can start talking about a peace in Gaza, a non-existent peace in Gaza. I'll have a better handle of what's going on depending on my next trip. So I cannot tell you where I'm going, but I think many of you have an idea. And then I can have an inkling and some inside information on the spot about where this is heading and where, of course, the Iranian leadership is heading. There's a lot of debate inside Iran about the next moves. There's a lot of debate on President Pezeshkian being too soft and still believing that the West will be open to any sort of agreement. That's completely unrealistic. So one thing that the Chinese and the Russians know for sure is whatever happens next, this attack on Iran, when it happens, once again, will be an attack on all of us. On attack on BRICS, on attack on SCO, and on an attack on the top drivers of both BRICS and SCO. So there are no illusions in Beijing or in Moscow. Even though Moscow will always say our war is not West Asia, our war is here on our western borders. That's correct. But they need to get their act together on a response if there is an attack on Iran. This is something that I would say is in many aspects, it's a taboo discussion in Moscow. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very sensitive discussion. You can have, for instance, good debates with people very close to the intel agencies or people who work for the intel agencies or some of the more outspoken members of think tanks, not the Valdai Club. Valdai Club continues to be Atlanticist. I have many friends who are members of the Valdai Club. But the Valdai Club, they still believe that there can be an accommodation with the West. I think they missed that high-speed rail train. Well, from the point of view of this latest Chinese tech trade move, this turns the chessboard completely upside down. Yeah. Especially because nobody was expecting it to be so soon and so sharp and so focused, right? It's something that many people in Moscow would be expecting from the Russians in terms of, okay, a final blow against those Kiev gangsters. And this final blow never comes. There are threats. Oh, this is a red line. Oh, this is another red line. Oh, this is still another red line. And a blow, Chinese style, like they just inflicted on the American industrial military Pentagonish complex is not coming, at least not yet. Once again, very tricky discussion to have in Moscow. Nobody will give you an answer about that, and nobody will give you an explanation apart from Putin's legalistic mind and his infinite Taoist patience and all that, but this is not going to cut it. We know what's going to happen next in terms of this Tomahawk Kabuki, plus the fact that NATO is now totally out of control in terms of ramping up their war against Russia, of course, with American weapons bought, price of gold, platinum, rare earths, and paid in ultra valuable euros that they don't have, by the way.
Right. As if that's not the same thing, Pepe. You know, buying weapons from NATO, buying weapons from the United States, and then employing them with U.S. intel and all of in U.S. direction and operation. It's just mind-boggling.
Yes, it's totally mind-boggling. But this is where we're going. Yep. There's a very important reason for this ramping up, and some circles of power in Moscow are now coming finally to the conclusion that Alaska was a kabuki. Total kabuki. And we were all fooled at it. All of us, we were fooled at the time. Okay, maybe this is the beginning, reset and blah, 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 blah. No, it was a kabuki. And I think the best explanation these past few days was once again by Ryabkov, number 2 at the foreign ministry. Ryabkov came up with a beautiful metaphor of a collapsing building. He said, this building is collapsing and the cracks now have reached the foundations of the building. So the building is about to collapse completely. And then he added, look, from our side, we are interested in, okay, let's rebuild this construction as soon as possible. But we don't see any interest on the other side to start doing this. So basically, Ryabkov is saying, Russia-U.S. relations are back to square one or square zero, for that matter. And then Putin, I don't remember if it was before or after Ryabkov, or during the Valdai, Putin said, look, if this Tomahawk thing goes on, then U.S.-Russia relations are back to, once again, square zero. So at least there are no more illusions in the Kremlin foreign ministry, certainly not in the Ministry of Defense. By the way, Tomahawks for them is like Storm Shadow, like Scalp. They know how to deal with Tomahawks. And in fact, they destroyed a lot of Tomahawks. Guess when? 7 years ago in Syria. So plenty of experience in this smashing Tomahawks. It's not going to change anything in the battlefield. And Putin also said that. It's not going to change anything in the battlefield. But that's very serious. The US is giving top-of-the-line intel to Kiev. So Kiev, with what they already have of long-range missiles, can attack oil refineries and even pipelines deep into Russia. NATO is getting into this game. So the Tomahawks, if provided, will get into this game as well. So what will have to be the Russian response? Another sneak in Ramstein, or another sneak in some back of beyond in Poland. Will they do that? Once again, Putin's legalistic mind, probably not. So, what's lacking from Russia, and it's the only language that these gangsters, I wouldn't say respect, but at least pay attention to, is something that is what the Chinese just did to the industrial military complex in the US. Something at this level. And the Russians are not there yet. And they keep, we advance, we are conquering one village every week and all that. So this can go on for another 10 years. It's ridiculous. And there are well-informed people in Moscow that they are saying, look, this war should have been finished last year. What are we doing here? Are we going to 2028, 29, 30? And then on 2030, NATO says it's going to be the NATO war against us, and we're still going to be fighting in Ukraine. So this doesn't add up. But okay, of course, there's only one person who has the answer to all these questions. And he's not talking.
Right. Pepe, I actually wanted to bring up what the Ministry of Commerce said, just so you can comment on this regarding the table turning a move that China made, which, to your point about what's happening with Iran, Russia, maybe assistance to Iran militarily, and also Russia's own predicament, having to fight what is turning out to be a forever war with NATO. All of this is going to lead eventually, as you said, to a major clash, clash because of moves like this. I mean, this is a huge move. This is what the Ministry of Commerce said about it in response to Trump. It's a legitimate action by the Chinese government, but they didn't highlight, the person who posted this didn't highlight what I thought was the most important part. China, as a responsible major country, employs major export controls on related items according to the law in order to better defend world peace and regional stability, and to fulfill non-proliferation and other international obligations, because rare earth minerals, in the context of frequent military conflicts in the world, China has taken note of the important uses of these medium and heavy rare earths on related items in the military field. And here it is. I just wanted to put it up so people can see
legitimate
what I was reading.
By the Chinese. Absolutely. Of course it is. Because they know that what the Pentagon is going to do with that, in fact, is already doing, already been doing, will continue to do. Not to mention that some of this stuff can end up, guess where? In the hands of gangsters of the Kiev mold, or worse, or reconditioned ISIS everywhere. They're absolute, or can you imagine a sort of semi-nuclear branch of the East Turkestan Liberation Movement, a team. Uyghurs, hardcore Uyghurs indoctrinated by MI6 and CIA. This could happen, of course. And MI6 and CIA would hand over these weapons to these people easily. Okay, now go to Xinjiang and blow it all up. Of course, the Chinese have to be worried about it. But obviously, mostly it's about the Pentagon. And the Chinese are very good at hitting where it hurts.
Right. Yeah, and they continue because after the response to the rare earth, I don't know if you saw this, to the rare earth regulations, they did this. So the Cradle, which you also contribute to, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China said, we will fight to the end. This is what they've been saying since the beginning of the trade war. But this is the move they made on October, as we speak. In October, it has imposed sanctions on U.S. subsidiaries of a South Korean shipbuilding firm. The Chinese government has also vowed to fight the trade war to the end. 5 U.S. subsidiaries of South Korea's Hanwha Ocean Group were targeted by Chinese sanctions. And this comes, Pepe, as the U.S., before the rare earth regulations came into effect this month in China, the U.S. was targeting Chinese shipping with international restrictions, sanctions, and the like.
I have a list somewhere, Daniel. I don't think I'll be able to find it now, but everything that the US was sanctioned before the Chinese lost their patience.
Yep.
It's rows of companies in every domain. So obviously, when the Ministry of Commerce saw the list of everything that has been sanctioned, we have to stop this thing. So they went for the nuclear option. Obviously. Don't provoke a superpower like this. And you think it's, no, they're never going to. And that's exactly the difference now between this Chinese response and the Russian non-response to the provocations. I wonder if this is being examined in detail by the Kremlin, by the Ministry of Defense. If not, they should, right? And obviously, when they look at this absolutely ghastly Zionist axis, the Trump-Netanyahu continuum, the power of the Zionist backers and donors behind Trump.
Right. You saw, right? You saw them, Adelson.
Yes, you saw them. You saw them in action. All of us saw them in action, and it's frightening. Really... It's frightening. It's absolutely frightening, right? And you add to all that the Russophobic mindset of American elites and Anglo-American elites as a whole. When you put this all together, and of course, the vassal state of mind of the Russophobic European elites. When you put this all together, in terms of Russia, the Russians by now, they should know in detail that the forever war against them is a forever war, really. And there will be no respite, period. So they have 2 ways to deal with that. Postpone a final conflagration, which would be inevitable between NATO and Russia, or go for an Oreshnik message and say, look, you're not paying attention. This is Mr. Oreshnik's business card. You're still not paying attention. Here's another one. That would be the only way to catch their attention. But we're still not there yet. Far from it, you know.
Right.
So many of us are expecting, okay, if there is a Tomahawk launched against a very valuable target deep inside the Russian Federation with the possibility of civilian casualties as well, Russia is going to respond with an Oreshnik. Not necessarily. We don't know. Probably not. And then Putin will come up with another excuse. So, you know, I think it's coming to the crunch, the whole thing.
Right.
It's coming to the crunch. And it does not depend on a Russian total victory in the next few months, because there won't be a total victory in the next few months. This thing will drag on and on and on and on and on. Right. What the Russians should know is that now this Zionist axis, Atlanticist, Russophobic Western front against them is ironclad, and it's not going to dissolve.
Right.
Forget Alaska. Forget any sort of next Alaska. Forget about another Trump-Putin phone call. This is all bullshit. Nothing's going to change. On the contrary, you know, ramp up is the way to go.
Right. Pepe, before I let you go, your final reaction, this is like the cherry on top to everything we've been talking about, especially with
The
China.
September exports. This is
The
fantastic. It's fantastic.
8.3% growth of overall exports that China has put out to the world amid all of these tariffs and, of course, renewed threats. But exports to the U.S. have fallen 27%.
They fell 27%. Exactly.
But exports to the ASEAN nations,
To the ASEAN, they are on and up and up and
15,
up. This is something
10,
we
and
discussed here in Thailand.
56 to Africa. 56%.
You bet.
Anyway,
And
your final thoughts.
to Africa. Absolutely. So, once again, proves the point of the Chinese. Even during the first batch of that tsunami of Trump tariffs a few months ago, was in the spring this year. They said, look, we don't need the American market anymore. It's less than 10% of our exports. Our big growing export markets are Southeast Asia and Africa. And these figures from only last month, a few days ago, prove that. So they can live by exporting even more to all the ASEAN partners here. After all, the 10 ASEAN nations, their number one trade partner is China already. And the infinite possibilities in the African market, not to mention, of course, South America. Trade between China and Brazil, once again, up and up. Soya beans bought from the United States, who cares? China is buying them from Brazil. So, and it's, Danny, what the most incredible thing is that there is not a single bloody idiot part of the Trump circle that is capable to analyzing these numbers. It's absolutely, it's out of proportion in terms of imbecility.
Well, you heard Trump. He said Netanyahu calls him about weapons he's never heard of. So he's not actually even asking his Pentagon people who might not have a damn clue themselves about what exactly is going on here. It's just full speed ahead on the assembly line.
Just look at the clownish Secretary of War. You don't need anything else, right?
Nope.
Even a World Wrestling Federation match is more credible than anything coming from this guy.
Pepe, it was great to be with you. Both of your articles are in the video description. We'll have to catch up again next month, I hope. And please do take care. Have a good rest. Stick around, everybody. There's plenty more show to come. Thanks again, Pepe.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody. And I'll be on China for the next few days. And then I'll be probably moving to another pasture. Most of you have an inkling where it's going to be. I just hope my visa comes in time.
All right, Pepe. Well, take care. I'll see you again.
Cheers. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.
Well, without any further ado, I want to bring back onto the show Mark Sleboda. He is an international affairs expert, geopolitical analyst. Mark, it's great to see you again. How are you doing?
Danny, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show. And I'm alive. How the hell are you?
Same. I'm alive, exhausted but alive, and we got a lot to catch up on, my friends. So let's get right to it. So Mark, how about we begin with this? I wanted to ask you about these reports first of a Ukrainian linked so-called hacker group releasing data that shows, and I'm going to pull it up here, that shows that, or supposedly shows, that Russia has been supplying fighter jets, or there's a deal in place to supply 48 advanced SU-35 aircraft to Iran in the lead up, what to many believe is going to be a round two with Israel, despite the Gaza peace kabuki theater and all of it. Now, this hasn't necessarily been totally rejected when asked about. Sergei Lavrov himself had this to say, and I just want to pull this up for you and then get your commentary. He said Russia will meet Iran's military needs despite sanctions. He didn't specify what that would be. Of course, Russia and Iran have a security partnership, but Sergei Lavrov has stated that they're not going to listen to sanctions. They're not going to follow them. We will develop military and technical cooperation with Iran. Despite UN sanctions, we have no restrictions. So, and here's that article here from the Tel Aviv-backed Iranian International. Mark, help us understand what's going on and how this at all changes the calculus, as there is a lot of talk about a renewed war coming very soon to Iran.
Yeah, I mean, a Su-35 aircraft sale has long been in the works for Iran, and from what we know, it was delayed primarily because Iran was dragging their feet. That there were, at one point, a year ago more, there were trainers because Russia is very methodical. It makes sure that the pilots of the prospective nation buying them are fully up to speed first on trainer aircraft before they graduate up to the most advanced, because you don't want to lose one of them in training, quite obviously. But then Iran didn't carry forward the deal. Russia was waiting on that, and the Su-35s aren't being used so extensively during the Ukraine conflict that Russia is certainly perfectly capable of meeting, the terms of such a deal. But it's going to be a process, just so you understand that, right? If Su-35s did, let's say, arrive in Tehran next week, which is not likely, but Iranian pilots would not be able to fly those off into the sky to confront Israel or the United States any more than Ukrainian pilots a year ago were able to jump in F-16s and fly into the contact line in Ukraine. Considerably, the Su-35 is a much more advanced aircraft as well. But we've heard Iranian officials in the last 2 weeks talk about S-400s also being on the way, of MiG-29s, right, and a older but capable aircraft, roughly comparable to the Russian F-16, either already in Iran. There have been sightings of them in Iran, or on the way. And I'm sure other supplies. Russia has been clear before that it would meet the military needs of Iran, and that it was Iran that was, not interested, at least until the last attack by Israel and the United States. Now there's some indications that Iran is going through. Now, Iran is what Putin described as a difficult country to be friends with, right? They have their pride. They have a belief in their own sovereignty and independence, and it's understandable. They don't want to be particularly dependent on any one country. And it's also understandable that they would be hesitant about depending too much on Russia. In the past, Russia and Iran have, in the distant past, have had confrontations. In the more recent past, if you want to go back to around 2010, when Dmitry Medvedev was president, and Russia and China both agreed to sanctions against Iran, although, to be fair, that was probably mostly because that was what would have forestalled a U.S. attack on Iran at the time. But there was a deal to deliver S-400s to Iran, and or was it S-300s? One of the two systems, an advanced air defense system to Iran, and Russia kept Iran waiting for years. because of these sanctions, and it was mostly, of course, to please the U.S. and Israel, because at that time, the policy of the Russian government was to try to blend into the West, right? That's what they wanted. So it is understandable that Iran would fear trusting and depending on another country too much. Russia is not the country it was in 2010. And I actually certainly agree with what your last guest was talking about being locked in a permanent conflict with the West. And if the Kremlin doesn't understand that now, then they should, and they had better catch up with the game. But I think they do, or at least enough of the people in the Kremlin do. And the truth of the matter is, if Russia and China and Iran and other countries, right, North Korea, Venezuela, so forth, do not hang together now, they will be picked off one by one, right? The U.S. sees a closing geopolitical window of opportunity to extend and maintain its hegemony before the global transfer of wealth via trade results in far too strong China, Russia, and other countries for them to, go into those countries' backyards. And for China, it's probably already too late for that. So Iran was obviously targeted a few months ago, right? There was a belief that a decapitation strike, together with Israeli intelligence activities on the ground, would bring down the Israeli government. The Iranian government. It did not. And the decapitation strikes were only partially successful. And whatever Mossad was cooking up for covert action and terrorists and separatists and whatever on the ground was nowhere near enough. On top of that, Iran's long-range strikes eventually exhausted and overwhelmed Israeli and Western air defenses over Israel, because the single greatest Achilles heel of the U.S. and the West right now is their over-reliance on one less than perfect air defense system, the Patriot, and their critical shortage of the PAC-3 interceptors for the Patriot. And that is ultimately why they had to call off the last war on Iran. Trump came in, dropped some bombs, declared victory, and declared a ceasefire. And because they didn't have enough air defense interceptors, and air defense was already being overwhelmed. And that is why it will be difficult for them to begin another war, because I can't imagine in just a few months they've built up enough. We know their production rate of PAC-3 interceptors. It's 600 a year by Raytheon, right? So they must, if they are to begin a new war against Iran, then they must have some new cunning plan to end it quickly. Another decapitation strike, some type of color revolution on the ground, or maybe they're sure they can target and hit all of Iran's missile launchers.
Mark, can I ask you a question about this, actually? Because there was this development that speaks to a bit of what you're talking about in terms of what is Israel's actual intentions here, because Vladimir Putin, Russia has become has gone in the middle. Supposedly Israel has been sending a message via Russia to Iran saying that they don't want to attack. That's what this is. That's what they're saying. That this was passed. Even the foreign minister of Iran has said that a phone call between Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin led to Netanyahu wanting to tell Iran that they are not going to attack. Now, what do you make of this? Because Arachi, the foreign minister, said, well, they're perfectly capable of deception, and look at the ceasefire now. Mark, look at what's already happened. Not even a hair's breadth, not even 24 hours in Israel is killing Palestinians.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know who you would consider more untrustworthy, Netanyahu or Trump, but I can't throw either of them. And so, I mean, I certainly wouldn't trust them, at all. And there's no reason to, right? I mean, Iran was lured into a attempted surprise attack last time because they engaged in diplomacy with the United States. Hamas Hamas leaders were just assassinated in Qatar while being there on the process, the pretext of examining a new U.S. deal. And already we see, this ceasefire it was always going to last up until they got, the hostage exchange, and then there was never any chance really of it lasting more than that. There was absolutely no way that Israel was ever going to allow Arab or Indonesian peacekeepers on the ground in their greater Zion. So it's not a surprise, and while there are military considerations, like I said, why it would be very difficult, if not prohibitive, for the U.S. and Israel to engage right now into another conflict with Iran. And the biggest one is the Achilles heel is air defense, and specifically the lack of air defense interceptors. We have no reason to believe that they have somehow magically ramped up production, and it will make it very hard. That doesn't mean that they won't settle on some cunning plan that they believe will work like they did the first time, right? That's the danger, their lack of military realism about their capabilities there. But, we can say that about many things before. So Israel can say that, but it certainly doesn't mean that Iran or Russia or anyone else should trust them for, even a split second on this. I certainly wouldn't. But the reality is even if everything we've heard, right? Russia has been sending military transports to Iran. There are plenty of reports on that in the past 2 weeks. We don't know what they contain, right? It could be normal, already contracted stuff. It could be brand new S-400s and what else, air defense systems. But regardless, this will take time. This is not something they can erect in a day, right? What Russia has is an integrated, interconnected, multi-layered air defense and electronic warfare network, the best in the world, as has certainly been demonstrated over the past few years. Oh, and while not 100%, it's as close as anything, it's the best in the world. And what happened in Israel, clearly shows that their Iron Dome and David's boomerang and everything else wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. Meanwhile, Russia's air defense has withstood, multiple rounds of Western cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and daily hundreds of drone attacks directed by U.S. satellites and everything else. So, but it's not going to magically appear overnight. It will take time to construct it, to integrate it, and to train up the personnel to properly use these advanced systems. So if the U.S. and Israel intend another deceptive, quick attack, then anything that Russia and or China, because there have also been some reports of Chinese military transports coming to Iran, will only help so much. It takes time. Whether we're talking the air defense, whether we're talking Russian fighter aircraft, it's not something that can be integrated overnight. As we've clearly seen is impossible to do for the West's proxy in Ukraine. All these fancy systems have to be operated by their own personnel, and even then, without integrated systems, they don't work very, interconnected, multi-layered systems, they have very limited effectiveness.
I have a question, Mark. When it comes to this question of especially the older models, the MiGs and even the air defenses that Russia is supplying Iran, I've heard reports out of Iran that have said that there are like Russian engineers and logistical support. Is this true? And does that at least help speed up the process for these kind of weapons to be more ready-made or are ready to use in combat? Or is it that it still takes some time? I think Israel is probably a little concerned that they might not have a surprise attack up their sleeve this time around. But nonetheless, as you said, and as everyone has come on this show, and I truly believe this too, something is going to come eventually because Netanyahu has not let go, or Israel has not let go of this regime change goal. So your thoughts about this?
Yeah. So, I mean, doubtless there are Russian military and military technical people on the ground. That is actually an essential. It's not something that would necessarily speed up the process. It is an essential part of the process. It wouldn't happen at all without it. I mean, we know that Russia has lots of personnel on the ground. For instance, it's scientists and engineers and workers at Bushehr, Iran's nuclear power plant. And even during the last strikes, Russia was quite clear that they were not removing their people from Bushehr. And they warned Israel, don't you dare. Our people are there. Do not hit that, right? And they didn't. But regardless, I do not expect a situation where Russia declares military forces on the ground in Iran as some type of a human tripwire, right? That is not the type of strategic partnership agreement that Russia and Iran have, as far as we know. It has no mutual defense clause like the one with North Korea does. Although, again, we're told, that Russia offered that to Iran and they turned it down. Likewise with the Chinese. Unfortunately, the level of alliance, trust, and integration between the three of them is still something that is not what it should be, and it needs to be. And hopefully they will make progress on making it so. Because if they don't, that, like I said, they will be picked off. But it was discovered, that Russia was a lot harder. The Blinken-Sullivan administration discovered that as much as they imagined they could take down Russia and pivot to China, that they couldn't. And then obviously Israel and the Trump administration believed they could they could quickly take down Iran, right? Pivot to Iran and then have Europe hold Russia in place and pivot to China. And obviously that didn't work out either. Now it appears that the Trump administration is looking for some low-hanging fruit for a victory, right, in Venezuela. But if they did that, right, Venezuela obviously has a much smaller and less capable military than Iran, right, or certainly more so, than Russia. They have very limited. They do have some Russian S-300s, some older systems, I believe, and some older air defense. But I mean, no one has any doubt in their minds that if the U.S. moved in force on Venezuela, that they could decapitate, with decapitation strikes, take out the Venezuelan government, and with the help of, opposition oligarchs and the like, who would raise their own right-wing armies and so forth, that, they could take out the Venezuelan government. The question then becomes, can they actually, though, occupy the country and govern it? That's another story, and depends on, the passion of the Venezuelan people who support Maduro for the continuation of the Bolivarian revolution. I'm not in a place to judge by that. I will only say that I'm always afraid in such situations because the U.S., the UK, Mossad, even Turkish intelligence involved have proven extremely successful in the past at covert co-option of top generals and political figures and getting troops to stand down. I mean, they had some 90% of the Syrian army, right, of 200,000 strong, that basically stood down and laid down their weapons and ran home under the order of their generals and officers. If they can do that in Syria, then, unfortunately, their possibility of doing that in Venezuela, exists as well. So I don't know. I have not been to Venezuela, and I can't say. But people who were on the ground in Syria didn't see that one coming either. So we don't know. We don't know. Right. But it's doubtless that the Trump administration is probably looking for an easy win. They see Venezuela as a low-hanging fruit. It has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. And you can bet, that there are people in the U.S. and the other Western deep states, the blob, if you will, who look at this like a geopolitical chess match. Oh, you think you're going to take our pawn or our knight or whatever in Ukraine away from us? Well, bam, there's your pawn in Syria. Bam, there's your pawn in Nepal. Bam, Venezuela,
Indonesia, right? Indonesia,
right.
everywhere.
We're in the long game already. I mean, we are in the conflict for global world order, which is taking place militarily, economically, cyber. Certainly in the information sphere, right? It's not just one conflict; it is a multiplicity of conflicts, as is appropriate for trying to stop the birth of a multipolar world order. We're in that game. We're well in that game. And Venezuela, what's going on there is just another part, one more battle in what will be ultimately a decades-long conflict, and that we'll all be blessedly lucky that doesn't end in nuclear Armageddon at the end of it.
Mark, briefly, I did want to get your reaction to how the Gaza Peace Kabuki Theater fits into all of what you just said, if we can even just do that briefly, for the sake of those who are looking for news about this. Israel has already taken out 7 Palestinians, not within 24 hours of that ceasefire. And then Mark, you had the incredible optics of Trump's very brief visit to the Knesset in Israel, as well as, of course, that absolutely pathetic summit that we saw in Egypt. And I want to just play a bit of this commentary about weapons, which speaks to, I think, this trust element in this broader conflagration you're talking about. Because when you hear the U.S. president talk like this is the one thing that Trump does. He just tells you straight up that this is all part of the agenda. Here we go.
I can tell you we have weapons that nobody's ever dreamt of. I only hope we never have to use them. I rebuilt the military. I was proud to do it, but some of the things I hated to do. I hated certain of the weapons because the level of power is so enormous. It's so dangerous, so bad. But we have to do what we have to do. We make the best weapons in the world, and we've got a lot of them. And we've given a lot to Israel, frankly. And Bibi would call me so many times, can you get me this weapon, that weapon, that weapon? Some of them I never heard of, Bibi, and I made them. But we'd get them here, wouldn't we? And they are the best. They are the best. But you used them well. It also takes...
So you used them well. We gave them weapons, of course.
All the military. I don't know what those weapons are. I have no idea.
All the bluster about them being the best weapons and all of that. What the truth here is that he is admitting straight up, giving Israel weapons and saying they use them well. And how do they use them? Well, they use them on
We
Gaza.
facilitated the genocide.
The genocide, and of course the war with Iran, and of course everything
And
else going on in
Lebanon,
this
and
nation,
yes.
Lebanon and Syria. So, Mark, close up on this before we move on to Ukraine.
Yeah, okay. I mean, this is a neo-colonial diktat. I don't expect it to last any more than the. Remember, we went through all of this actually before. I mean, there was a very similar ceasefire when Trump first came into office, and that fell apart even sooner than this one did, because at least they pushed through the hostage exchange. Although I understand that the Palestinian hostages that Israel has, it has already reneged and is deciding who they will let go and who they will not let go now. But I mean, I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but why is this happening? Because Hamas is defeated, right? They're defeated not in the sense that they were necessarily militarily beaten in the tunnels beneath Gaza, but because the Israeli-U.S. war on the Palestinian people, right? As I mean, because this is essentially a counterinsurgency conflict. That's what it is. The reservoir of people, the Palestinian people of Gaza, that Hamas operated out of, is, on the brink of I mean, they're well past the point of catastrophe. They're in the midst of a genocide. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of Palestinian children starving to death any day. Try to find a building left standing in Gaza. I mean, it is. I mean, it's really unimaginable for us, in the first world, to imagine, what the Palestinian people have endured. But they can't take anymore. They just in the latest offensive into Gaza by Israel, they drove 800,000 Palestinians out of the environs of Gaza City, and just into tents and concentration camps where they were killed as they lined up for a trickle. A fraction of the food that would, actually be required to keep them alive, that Israel was letting in. And when the reservoir that a counterinsurgency force like Hamas operates out of, the people, when that is done to it, but that was always the goal, right? The way to beat Hamas was to ethnically cleanse, right? And that ethnic cleansing isn't completed yet, but it has already reached such a degree. The Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said the other week at the UN, that the official numbers, right, of Palestinian dead were 67,000. But that the UN experts told him that the real number is probably 10 times that. That's what the Russian foreign minister said at the United Nations. And for those of us, who are not capable of math in the digital AI age, that's 670,000 out of a pre-war population in Gaza of, just over 2 million, I believe. This is being forced on Hamas, and they don't really have many options. And they said they have to trust in Trump's guarantees, that they just won't all be wiped out. They're supposed to surrender their arms. They are promised some amnesty at the end. There's talk about them being folded into the quisling Palestinian Authority Defense Force, but it is the dissolution of Hamas. Why? Because Hamas has been the Palestinian people. Hamas has been defeated because the Palestinian people have been beaten down so badly that they're simply not capable of resistance anymore. And this is being gloated and being presented on. And again, I don't expect this deal to last, because ultimately Israel will never agree to the terms of it, and then they'll just go back to killing Palestinians again until Egypt or Jordan opens up the borders and they force them out. There's no reason to expect anything else. This Israeli government every official that I can think of has been openly talking about the genocide, right? I mean, they're literally talking about driving the Palestinian people out. They're not hiding it. I mean, that's the whole crux of the South African genocide case against them is, well, they literally said what they're doing, and they're not shy about it. So it's a very bad situation. The Russian government's position on all of this is, well, they said, if you can actually bring peace, well, I mean, that's good. And about the deal on the offer, the words of the Russian foreign minister was that they support it because there's nothing else on offer. He says, we are realists. He said, we are pragmatists. They're not going to get anything better. Why? Because, this is the situation. And I know a lot of people hope that, somehow, I don't know, Israel would collapse or Hamas would lead some glorious resistance and everything. But they've been mauled. Hezbollah has been mauled. The Houthis are still fighting, but they're only capable of so much. And while Israel was certainly not capable of regime changing Iran, Iran took their wounds in that conflict as well. So I'm a little sometimes disturbed by some of what I believe is, I don't know, the hope and political activist level rhetoric that comes out of a lot of people in the alt media community, which is fine if you're a political activist or if you're a journalist. But if you're presenting yourself as an analyst, I think it's problematic. And then I don't think it leads to a very good track record. I've often said myself, and I stand by it, hope is the death of analysis. And if that makes me a bad guy for saying it, well, then I'm happy to wear the black hat. I've already got the black suit and the black background. I'm chill with this. I'll force this black pill down your throat.
Well, no, Mark. I mean, I appreciate certainly the realism. I mean, for me, in my estimation, how I cover things, I think it's important to understand the significant challenges and real setbacks from the decapitations and the massive loss of life. I mean, all of these things are undeniable, no doubt, whether it's Gaza, Lebanon, and even Iran. I think one point that I try to make, though, just in the case of the developments of history, is that resistance always takes a really bad beating wherever it comes up against empire. How many millions died in Korea and Vietnam, and we can go on Algeria. But the resistance keeps fighting. I mean, I don't even think that's even hope. I think that's just they keep fighting, they keep going. And history shows that victories can happen. So I think that
does. And if that gives some people hope, that's good. But I
don't even know. Of course, the present is very bleak right now, and that's the truth. That's why we have, I think that's why we have so many different opinions and perspectives, is because everyone's trying to frame it in a way that either supports or strengthens or bolsters the reality on the ground.
I think it's important to recognize, though, that Hamas has no allies. No allies. There's no country out there, possible exception of Qatar, which also, by the way, hosts U.S. military bases and has taken their own beating in all of this, at least to their egos. No country supports Hamas. Egypt doesn't support Hamas. Iran doesn't support Hamas. Not really. There's Saudi Arabia doesn't support Hamas. There's Russia and China. Well, they'll talk to them, but they don't support Hamas. Nobody does. So that makes their situation extremely. No one at the state level, at least, that makes their situation a bit more difficult than some of other revolutionary situations. And the other Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority, I mean, they're as quisling as you get.
Well, that is literally a neo-colonial entity. Yes.
It's unfortunate that the Palestinian people have only those two options really presented to them, but of course that's by design too, right? You take the extremists that we're allowed to kill you then just because we say the name Hamas, right? There was someone from Hamas in that building once. Then we can blow it up, right? And it's all cool.
Well, I think what's interesting is that the ways that the resistance on the ground, which isn't just Hamas, it's the PIJ, it's the PFLP, these forces, what they've had to do actually. Right. They're not. They're not politically. Of course, Hamas is the political leadership, and they have their base in Qatar and whatnot politically, but on the ground in Gaza, what they've had to do, which many have reported on, is they've had to use rudiments of Israeli weaponry to make their own weapons, and that's how they have been fighting back. And so I think that's what has made a lot of people say, "Wow, that's an impressive thing to do."
Turning pipes into rockets. I mean, it's
when you've been
literally
turned, when you've been bombed to the Stone Age, and I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens from here. But the resistance itself, at least Hamas, even in Hamas's case, they haven't yet agreed. I don't know if they will agree or not, but they have not yet agreed to disarm.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of questions, of course, on what happens from
the whole
here.
deal will collapse well before that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think everything is going. I think it's going to be up in smoke not too long after we talk here, Mark.
I am not. I want to make clear. First of all, I'm obviously horrified by all of this. Second of all, I do not for a second doubt the will of Hamas to resist, and I do not believe that their will has been broken. I think, though, at some point, even they have to acknowledge how much the people that they operate out of have suffered, and that, I mean, and that's part of
we saw that in Lebanon, right? We saw that in Lebanon. Like what Israel did to Lebanon was actually to a magnitude even greater than what was happening at Gaza at the time, in terms of just that case in point. Like, we just look at that particular time,
the civilian population.
And Hezbollah probably could have kept fighting on the border. But you know what? The civilian situation does really matter, and it causes, and concessions are made. So, Mark, though, I wanted to close our time together, last 20-30 minutes or so, on the Ukraine situation. And I wanted to bring up a series of developments that I think speak to a kind of forever war situation, and also dangerous escalations on the part of both the United States. Let me just call it the U.S. and NATO, because I am not going to say that they are separate. The U.S. NATO axis has been escalating with Russia. I wanted to first play from Donald Trump a message that he had to Vladimir Putin. Here we go.
They need Patriots very badly. They'd like to have Tomahawks. That's a step up. They'd like to have Tomahawks. We talked about that. And so we'll see. Well, I don't know. I might have to speak to Russia, to be honest with you, about Tomahawks. Do they want to have Tomahawks going in their direction? I don't think so. I think I might speak to Russia about that, in all fairness. I told that to President Zelensky, because Tomahawks are a new step of aggression. Right? You understand?
So Tomahawks are a new step of aggression. Mind you, this is Russia's position as well. They've said, Dmitry Medvedev, everyone has said that this would be another step on the escalatory ladder. And here is Mark Rutte. Let's get him on the mix here, where he, of course, does what NATO does, which is bring in China amid a warning that Russia will be attacking NATO very soon.
It's highly likely that China will force the junior partner in that relationship, being Russia, under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, to move against NATO here, to keep us busy. For all these reasons, we have to make sure that we work as strongly together with them. And then on the hybrid threats, this is, of course, a big worry, and we are working on it.
So that was at this one of their alliance summits, assemblies,
it's funny that he should bring up junior partners, because if anything, it's far more likely that the Europeans, as the junior partner, are being fed out by the United States to buy time for them to pivot to China. I mean, they're quite
Mark,
open about it.
Mark, my question to you is the U.S. NATO, if you want to call it an alliance or a so-called partnership, are they begging for Russia to launch an Oreshnik, to do something very big against Ukraine in this forever war? Because it seems like that's what they're begging. They're begging for a greater escalation. What's your assessment?
Certainly, there are people, right, within NATO, within the U.S., deep state, even some people within the Trump administration that is exactly what they want. And let's be clear, when Mark Rutte makes those comments like that China will make Russia attack Europe, right? Who is that directed at? That's directed at manipulating Donald Trump, right? Because Donald Trump, obviously he's got a thing with China, right? And he's got a very different thing, in his head for whatever reason with Russia. And so the attempt is to equate the two of them together. That is an obviously, I mean, they're not aiming that at the European people. The European people are like, China, what? I mean, that's the other side of the world. What do we, this is, part of the game of, the eternal game of that he invites of manipulating Trump to make sure that there is escalation against Russia. Like the Europeans, the Americans, the Europeans fulfilling their roles as the willing vassals of U.S.-led Western global hegemony right now, they cannot accept a loss to Russia. They won't accept it. No matter how real it is, you can't convince them because they will not accept that reality. So they will continue escalating any way they can if that's what it takes, dragging it out, however many Ukrainians die, that they will that doesn't bother them in the slightest. So the Tomahawks are just one more step up the ladder, of course, to direct Russia-NATO confrontation. Now, there's a lot of problems, of course, with delivery of the Tomahawks, one being launchers, because the Tomahawk was developed during the time of the Short Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, right? Primarily, it wasn't allowed to have ground-based launchers. It had to be launched by a strategic bomber or by submarines or surface craft, destroyers or submarines. And that's what it was used for decades. Since the U.S. pulled unilaterally out of the Short and Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty under the first Trump administration, the U.S. has been slowly working towards developing ground-based launchers for the Tomahawk. And they do have one system, the Typhon, but is a very large, very advanced, not very mobile system that would supposedly the U.S. only has two of them at the moment anyway. And they would just get eaten up by Russian drones and missiles and whatnot. So that doesn't seem practical. However, just in the last days, we've had an announcement at the Expo in the United States of the Oshkosh Defense Company, which has announced that it has a much more mobile ground-based launcher for the Tomahawk, also for guided multiple launch rocket system rockets and switchblade drones and many other things that they have ready for production. It's called the XMAV, and that is what we don't know. Right? Do they already have some? Do they have some already produced, already willing or, to be sent to Ukraine? Is that what they're talking about? We don't know. Or is it bluff yet? We don't know. The Russian perspective is still from at least Putin's level, that they're still attempting to play this game of engagement with Trump for whatever they think they might get out of it. But also that Russia is prepared to withstand the Tomahawk. They've withstood the ATACMS, the Storm Shadow, the Scalp, the guided multiple launch rocket system, the ground launch small diameter bomb, everything the U.S. has sent through some combination of Russia's air defense and electronic warfare. Profiles were quickly built up. They got a few shots, and that's it. And you don't hear about them anymore because they were rendered ineffective. And the Western mainstream media has admitted that, with each of these weapons in turn, after they come to realize that they weren't the wonder weapon, the Wunderwaffe that was going to change this conflict. There was a headline in the Western media last year, advanced Western weapons work against Russia up until they don't. Like a Star Trek, flick or series, it's like dealing with the Borg. You get 3 shots with your phasers, and you better make them count, because after that, the shields have adapted and you're screwed, right? So that's where they are, and Russia is confident that a few hundred Tomahawks, with the Financial Times telling us that that's how many the U.S. has available to send to a few hundred, with all the other requirements. I mean, we got to save a few to throw at Venezuela, right? I mean, and not to mention China. It's not going to make any difference. They'll do some damage, particularly if they pick soft targets, right? Not military targets, oil refineries and the like, which Russia will rebuild. They're very good at rebuilding these things very quickly. They're not afraid of the Tomahawks. They've made that clear. There are voices in Russia, though, that Russia should be telling Trump in much stronger terms that they won't accept this, like they did to Biden, because Biden was firing ATACMS missiles into Russia just before Trump took office, back when Trump said such idea was crazy and would lead to World War III, and that he was entirely against it. But it seems that a leopard does change its spots, if you consider Donald Trump a leopard. And now, as me and Brian Berletic and a number of others said, that, eventually they will whisper in his ear, if you want to de-escalate, you have to escalate to de-escalate. And that's where we are. So Trump, the Financial Times also told us, is directing the Kiev regime's drone strikes with satellite guidance and intelligence to degrade Russia's energy infrastructure, or attempt to anyway, to a degree that even Biden was not crazy about. So we're already past that point. It did occur to me. So I mean, the whole goal of this is to do so much damage to Russia quickly by long-range strikes that they come to the negotiation table and agree to American terms to end the conflict, which is to say, freezing the conflict along current lines, with the understanding that in a few years, whenever we're able, we'll take this territory back. I mean, that's literally what they want. They've been pretty clear about that. The Tomahawks aren't going to do it, just like the Storm Shadows and the Scalps didn't do it, and the ATACMS didn't do it. And I think there might be some realization. Now, this is pure speculation on my part, but I think they would want to shock and awe. They would want to do as much damage in as brief a time as possible, knowing full well of Russia's ability to attack their air defense and electronic warfare. So if I were them, what I would do, pure speculation, is I would provide the Tomahawks and get Germany to provide the Taurus, and to get the UK to dig up whatever more Storm Shadows and Scalps they've been able to put together, and to have it all fronted by a huge drone swarm provided to the Kiev regime to exhaust Russian air defense, days of it, and then I would let them all go at once to overwhelm the intention of overwhelming Russia's air and electronic warfare, to bring home to Russia that the West will not accept a Russian victory, and that they have to accept a freezing of the conflict on the current conflict line on American terms, not Russian terms. Now, I don't think this would work in the end, because Russia simply would not bow that way, whatever was done. But there's also a much greater risk of that. That is a huge geopolitical risk, because the demands in Russia to let the Oreshniks and whatever else fly, not just at the Kiev regime, but at U.S. military bases in Germany, where all of this is directed, would be very high. And then, where would we would all be going from there? So that would be an extremely risky strategy. But I believe the West is just desperate enough, and Trump is enough of a buffoon, easily pushed around by the neocons around him to buy into that. So that's speculation. But at least we can be pretty sure the Tomahawks are going to be coming Russia's way. They're going to try to get as much damage out of them as quickly as they can, and the war will go on. There is no, and your previous speaker spoke right. There is no immediate end in sight. This will most likely grind on for years. The Kiev regime's ability to militarily resist will continually go down. The West can't keep it provided with the air defense it needs. They can't keep it provided with artillery or a host of other munitions, but they can provide enough to keep it fighting, particularly if Russia has to occupy every single town, city, and everything across the country. This could, and they're talking about going to war with Russia in 2028, 2029. They hope to drag it out that long. That's okay, though, because there's enough people in Russia saying that this is great, because this gives us a protracted conflict. We are remaking Russian society from the ground up. United Russia has 1,500 SMO veterans running for office in local elections this cycle. There's some people in Russia that are very happy about this. That they said Russia will never turn back now. There will be no chance of any Navalny's or liberal infiltration or anything like that. Then Putin has spoken outright that the veterans of the SMO must become Russia's new political and social elite. So,
wow, yeah,
forever what?
Yeah, I mean, it's a calculation, Mark, that the way that Russia's fighting the war allows Russia to maintain, if not even grow, in terms of its economic development, stability, its military-industrial complex, and that massive escalation that I said in the question to you, which is what NATO, US, what they're begging for. They want the Oreshniks to fly. They want the Tomahawks to fly. They want Russia's nuclear doctrine to be pushed to the limit, because if Russia feels like it has to go fast, then that allows for, forget about NATO and the US. This is how I think about it. I want to know your opinion. Forget about NATO and the US, but having the capabilities. They want the catastrophe to be what speaks for the US and NATO, and allows for Russia to be weakened in that way, even if it comes at great cost to the US empire, which it would. But the cost to Russia is what really matters to them. What's your reaction to this? Because that seems to be why Russia, it seems to be a constant, like, Putin is bluffing, Putin is weak, Russia won't do it. They're saying it all the time now. Ukraine, they're saying it now every day in the mainstream media. Ukraine is winning now. Look at how much Russia has lost. They're doing this cycle again as they push forward with these escalations. What's your reaction?
Yeah, Russia is very confident in their strategy, their pace, right? The first, nearly the first 3 years of this conflict, Russia's economic growth, despite all the sanctions and everything, was higher than that of the EU or the United States, right? Russia's economy slowed to a slow growth this year, still growth, but a very slow growth, but by intention, because the economy was running hot and they wanted to bring down inflation. So they specifically raised their key rates out of a deliberate attempt to cool down the economy, to bring down inflation, and that has worked. And now they're working it back up. But the Russian economy is stable. All right, they've just signed a gigantic Power of Siberia 2 deal with China. They just a few months earlier, they worked out a long 10-year gigantic oil supply contract with India. And the Russian economy is actually less dependent on oil and gas, down to about 10% of the budget, of the GDP that it's ever been, because their economy is strong otherwise. Russia was, very quickly adapted to produce everything that had been supplied by the West. It probably entered the WTO way too quickly, as far as I'm concerned, if they ever should have. And economically, they feel that they are better positioned to win a long war of attrition against the West than the West is against them, which is why they chose that strategy. And it's working for them. They feel that they can continue this conflict for years into the future. And we had the German defense minister, or the last German defense minister, Boris Pistorius, last year, point out that Russia is actually producing far more weapons than it needs for the special military operation right now, that they are stockpiling, right? That they are building up. And why are they building up, right? Because that is a deterrent against the NATO-Russia conflict that is likely to come anyway. But then at least they will be far better prepared for it than the West is. So yes, the Kremlin is happy. They are in a box. The rules of the game, such as it is, where they are winning, and they're winning decisively, and nothing the West does is changing that long, grinding, bloody lava flow to victory, as U.S. generals have described the Russian advances. Inexorable, inevitable, not necessarily fast, but undeniable. All of the strategies by the West, politically, economically, this theater of seizing a ship for a couple days, this thing with the tomahawks, everything is to try to provoke Russia to outside of that box where they are comfortable, right? Where they're winning. And a good deal of the composition of that block is Russia's diplomatic victory, which is what has enabled their economic and military victory. Because the rest of the world outside the West has never agreed to the West's existential economic war of sanctions against Russia, which means that ultimately that has failed and actually resulted in far greater blowback and economic isolation for the West than it did for Russia. And part of that, maintaining that diplomatic support, is not doing anything that would make Russia sacrifice, if you want to call it the diplomatic moral high ground that they've held, as far, at least, as the world outside the rest sees things. Now, if Russia was to go off half-cocked and let loose a tactical nuke, that is exactly what the West would like, right? Because that would push Russia outside the bounds of diplomatic acceptability, and more countries like India and Brazil and Indonesia might start to doubt their position on all of this. That there will continue to be all kinds of provocations and false flags and these exacerbations of the conflict. Anything to try to push Russia outside of that box, where again they're grinding their way to victory. And so far, Russia hasn't budged. They haven't budged militarily. They haven't budged diplomatically. All attempts to rock their boat economically have ultimately failed. All of these strikes, these oil refinery strikes, and that we were now told by the Financial Times were directly assisted and directed by the United States, by the Trump administration, right? Over the last couple of months. What they resulted in is that Russia was temporarily producing less gasoline. They simply imported more gasoline, but because they were refining less temporarily, they had a lot more oil to sell in crude form. So that's what they did. Their crude exports jumped dramatically, and they made bank on the crude shipments because the price of oil has been kicking up. So they made money anyway. That's the folly of trying to win an economic war of attrition against the world's biggest global commodity supplier. It is a strategy that has failed. If you make Russia produce less oil, if you convince more countries not to buy it, it's a finite commodity that only means the prices of the market will go up. You will suffer because you need that energy, and Russia will make money anyway because even if they're selling less, with the prices higher, they'll make more money anyway from what they do sell. You can't win economically against that, and part of that is simply because they have never understood the global market. They vastly overestimated the importance of their own service and high-tech consumer gadgets economies, and vastly underestimated the importance of the gas, the oil, the wheat, the metals, the rare earth metals in China's case that everyone needs, right, for a modern economy. And actually, it's a whole nother topic we don't have time to go into. But the trade, the great U.S.-China trade war redux, I think, is the real story of this week. And China is just bitch slapping the Trump around.
Pounded them, right? Total pounding. I mean, it's been totally embarrassing. Maybe your final word. You can give a final word on this, Mark, as well. Maybe we can tie it all together as we close here. You know, we talked about puppetry. One of the reasons, you know, I really don't buy the whole isolationism. The U.S. is just going to let NATO do what it wants in Europe, just selling the weapons. I truly will always believe that as long as the current political arrangement exists in the U.S. and in Europe, that the U.S. will be tugging and ordering around Europe and the UK, if it doesn't consider itself Europe anymore, whatever it wants to do and whatever it wants in terms of its foreign policy objectives. And here is Donald Trump in a very embarrassing but also a pretty hilarious moment demonstrating this lapdog junior partner relationship that Europe has, the UK has with the US.
United Kingdom. Where's United Kingdom? Where's Russia? Come here. Is everything going good? Very good. That's very nice of you here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice.
So calling Keir Starmer, not by his name, but by the United Kingdom, bringing him up to the podium. This was in Egypt during the so-called peace summit. And then, you know, telling him, okay, go back to your place. I mean, this is just the kind of relationship that Europe and the UK has developed with the US. So your reaction to this amid what is going to be Europe, you know, the EU has shown in recent months that it is increasing its trade with China amid the trade war. China has made up a percentage of this decoupling the U.S. is doing with these tariffs with Europe. Africa actually makes up the most of the export, making up that gap in exports. And then, of course, you have the rest of the global South. But so, Mark, your reaction to this as we close here?
I think Keir Starmer was probably just thrilled that Trump didn't call him England or Azerbaijan, right? And you know, actually got the name of the country that he's from, you know, at least in acronym terms correctly. By the way, what were Armenia, the president of Azerbaijan and the prime minister the president of Azerbaijan and the prime minister of Armenia, what were they doing in Egypt? What did they possibly have to do with the ceasefire in Gaza? I don't know. It seems like Trump just presented a parade of the most quisling countries to him, you know, to have them kowtow to him on stage for this obscene photo opportunity. That's what it seemed to me. The numbers that you presented about China's own intentional decoupling from the United States with your last guest. I actually highlighted on my own show just last night, and I think they're really important, and it's why China isn't afraid. There's another helium, just one example about how China has identified its own weaknesses, its own points of leverage that the U.S. might use against it. And one of them is helium, right, which is used in a lot of industrial processes. And 2 years ago, China was 95% dependent on the United States for helium supply. Well, they identified that weakness and they acted on it. And 2 years later, China only gets 5% of their helium from the United States. They prepared for this. And all of this counter sanctions is actually what they are with the rare earths. These are, the rare earths specifically that the U.S. needs for their high-tech industry, their AI industry, and most important, their military-industrial complex. And China has made clear that this is a tit for tat for the U.S. trying to deny China with through sanctions and export controls high-end semiconductors, right? And the tools, lithography machines and the like to build semiconductors. So this is a tit for tat. You want to deny us that? Okay, we'll deny you the rare earths that everyone needs from the most basic level to make the semiconductors in the first place. And actually, you know what? These are only export restrictions. As long as it's for civilian use and you file the appropriate forms, we'll allow you to buy them. But if they're for military purposes, right, or potential dual use, then we have security concerns, right, in the interest of national security. They are directly mirroring very intentionally with everyone, including another the issue of U.S. ports, ships docking in their ports. They've just put a tax on that in a response to what the U.S. has done the same. And China has more mirrored the U.S. Not only is this directly to the U.S., but they are forbidding any other countries that they export any rare earth products to from then re-exporting that to the United States or face sanctions from China, not allowing them to do that either. This is a economic counterplay that China has been preparing for years. They've seen this coming. They've taken action to limit their own exposure that the U.S. might use to leverage against them, and then they've released this now ahead of this big APEC summit in South Korea in 2 weeks. And what we see here is the U.S. has been defeated. It's being defeated militarily on the ground in Ukraine by Russia, and it's being defeated economically in a trade war that the U.S. started against, by China, and quite significantly. And of course, both of those are dovetailed together in a diplomatic victory over the United States, in the growth of BRICS, the bloc behind that at the United Nations, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as alternative, world financial and political architecture being built up. And they're still flailing about, and what can they do? Let's go attack and overthrow another government, Venezuela. I mean, that's where they are, because that's the only thing they can really do. And again, Venezuela is only being chosen because it's the low-hanging fruit, the one that they think they can actually accomplish now. And
Right. They think
always,
there's a
there's
possibility.
always the potential that China is
Right.
factoring that into their decision
Yeah.
to unlaunch this counterplay to the extent it is now, because it's all against the U.S. military, right? Because that's who's being denied. Yes, dual use too. Yes, it will affect civilians. Right. But behind closed doors, are they saying, you think you're going to move on Venezuela? We're going to shut down your military. You won't be able to build any more Tomahawks or Patriot interceptors or anything else. So I don't know that. But it
No,
is speculation.
but the ministry, I mean, I'll pull it up really quick, Mark. The Ministry of Commerce in China did give an indication that war, military conflict plays a huge role in why they have decided to
Yes.
put into place this ban. I mean, right here, this is the Ministry of Commerce in China's statement in response to Donald Trump, saying quite clearly that in the context of turmoil and frequent military conflicts in the world, China has taken note of the important uses of medium and heavy rare earths and related items in the military field. And China is a responsible country employing export controls on related items according to the law in order to better defend world peace and regional stability and to fulfill non-proliferation and other international obligations. I mean, and here's the statement where you can read it for yourself. That and they see it as a legitimate action by the Chinese government. I mean, this is to me, this is basic stuff, but at the same time, it's big because it's not only Venezuela, as you said. It's not only the Iran or Ukraine. It's also right on China's doorstep. If they're selling rare earths to companies and monopolies and U.S. contractors that are then making weapons to then station on Taiwan or in the Philippines or whatever, that's China's helping the very war machine that has
it is. And they've been preparing this for years, right? They made sure that they would be completely on top of this, that the U.S. would have minimum leverage and to counter back, and they've unleashed it now, and it all makes perfect sense. And for all of us for years who have been asking, why is China willing to provide funding, through dollar reserves and through, these rare earths and other things, exactly for, the military that the U.S. was building up to use against it in Taiwan and the Philippines and elsewhere. Well, the Chinese have thought all of this, and they had a 10-year plan like they do for everything else, and they're way ahead of the rest of us. And this has been unleashed now. And I just just want to say ni hao to our Chinese overlords.
Ni hao. yeah, ni hao. Sure, you can say ni zui jin怎么样. That just means how are you doing?
I'm just beginning. I said my wife, we need to learn to speak Chinese.
我的朋友中国人. That's my Chinese friends. It's buckle up, everybody, because this is only going to get more intense. All of these flashpoints that we just talked about, they're all coming together. And the Trump administration, people might be wondering, why is the Trump administration behaving like this? It's not only that Trump is Trump and that his administration is his administration that he handpicked, the Rubios, the Crusader, Hegseth, whatever. They don't really have any choice. Warmongers, elites that require war, that see a new world kind of building in its midst. Is there any choice that these monopolies have? The Alex Karps, the Palantirs, the Peter Thiels. If China is able to do what it's doing, which you said very correctly, Mark, to prepare the way for the actual economic decoupling, which was coming anyway, and then, of course, to prepare the way for this war and to start pulling these cards to defend itself and possibly others too, then, of course, on the other side, we're going to see dramatic escalations to stop this. So
they'll get desperate, right? They're getting desperate. All they've got left is a big stick, and that big stick isn't as big as it used to be. Not in relative terms. Not in relative.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Well, Mark, this has been great. I wanted everyone to point to in the video description Mark's Boosty account. That's the primary place where you can support him. I'll pull it up quickly so you all can make sure this is what it looks like. But what's most important is that after the show, after you hit that like button here, go to the video description and be sure to check it out. Support if you can. And also, of course, all the places to support this channel are there as well. Patreon, Substack, and so much more. But Mark, anything you want to say before we head out of here?
Yes. All of you out there, buy this man a coffee because he obviously needs it.
It's been a long day. And honestly, I did not get much sleep.
You do a lot of this.
I woke up. it's so funny. I mean, you have dogs, so you understand this. I woke up this morning, you know, my when there's thunderstorms, like there was rain there was yesterday. He doesn't like to go to the bathroom in the same way. You know, he doesn't do his business in the same way. It's like, you know, he has pit bull in him, and pit bulls, they hate the rain. So they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna hold it for 24 hours or whatever, 12, 16 hours. So he woke me up at 5 a.m. today. And then, of course, it's getting cold out here, so the mosquitoes are desperate. They woke me up. It's like, oh my god, you know, I feel like Pepe Escobar in Thailand or something, but I'm not there. So I was awake at 5, 6 a.m. Very little sleep, and then had this show today. So, but it was great. Great conversations all around, especially with you, Mark, as always. So we're gonna head out of here. Thanks for everyone as I pulled them up, all of the super chats. Thank you to all the moderators who were here today doing the work to help moderate the chat. I see Ware in there. Thanks to all the YouTube members, everybody, the audience who came out today on this Tuesday after Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. With that said, everybody, I'm back tomorrow with Mohammed Marandi, Loki, and Ali Abunima to talk about West Asia, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, October 15th. Be there. See you then. Bye-bye.